Just fucking do it. Subscribe now. More than once during the seminar, I asked you, am I the only one that reads the fucking paper? Am I the only one that knows all this shit? I apparently am the only white, black, or purple man that read that report. We're through. Your DNA is soon to be wiped out. And nobody talks about it. Remember that thing with Tom Cruise yesterday and Jack Nicholson said, "You can't stand the truth." Remember? You can't. Or as they say in this part of the world, you can't. How did we get here? And PC is kind of like the cherry on the cake, on top of the cake. Or the icing. Maybe we haven't seen the cherry on top of the cake yet, but we've certainly seen the icing. How is this possible? I.e., from yesterday, they're building a $20 billion nuclear plant almost on top of the water. Some of the smart asses, this retort to that is, well, you need a lot of water in a nuclear plant, which is absolutely true. But not when it's under 20 feet of water. That's not the kind of water that a nuclear plant needs. But 3,700-page report. It's too late to prevent climate chaos. Well, that'll do a hell of a job on electric cars, right? It's perfect for us. Now, I already heard that from before, that Putin is taking money, supposedly, to Africa. That's in the old days, before most of you were born. That's where the savage beasts like Idi Amin existed. And apparently he's been taking out, $1 billion a year for the last 20 years and putting it in African banks. Am I the only one that knows this? Because you don't want to know. Because if you did know, it's like one of the biggest speed bumps, and you'll think it's Mount Everest, but one of the biggest speed bumps for the QLA program is each and every one of you that decides to go forward with this, or in some way has already decided to go forward with this, should have made the decision, I have pissed my entire life down a fucking rat hole. And if you can't say that, if you can't, as they say in Scotland, then you're not going to be able to go, run towards the gunfire, and all the things, metaphors that I've used. Now, it's easier to say that when you're 22 years old. It's easier to say that when you're 18 years old. It's easier to say that when you're 25 years old. It's a motherfucker to say it when you're 40. Because that means most of what you did, heretofore has been like taking a piss down a rat hole. But the guys and the gals and the it's to me, it's shameful that I even have to add it's in the end. The world is fucked. Up until about a year or two ago, when I'd go to universities, and one of the first universities I spoke at was Oxford, which is online. And I'd say, how many classes have you had in selling a business? Nobody hands goes up. How many classes have you had in buying a business? Nobody hands goes up. Okay? How many leadership classes have you had? Except for the Naval Academy, no hands go up. And you call this, and I almost always speak at either the law schools or the schools of business. And so I say, you call this a school of business. And because the three of the most important things, the leadership's the most important, but buying and selling a business. About 4 or 5 years ago, University of Pennsylvania, where I ultimately spoke at, started a class in how to sell a business. And it's a upper division class, so you take it in your third year of a 4-year degree. In America, they have 4-year degrees. And it's taught by a PhD, CPA, or chartered accountant, PhD, who's never sold a fucking business. in the Wharton School, arguably one of the finest business schools on the planet. Maybe by some standards, Elon Musk seems to think it's maybe the best school on the planet because that's where he went. Of course, President Trump would say the same thing. But when I went to the University of Pennsylvania, I did a lot of research, and Benjamin Franklin started it in 1743. Of course, he had only a third grade education, and he was a whoremonger. Some people say he died of syphilis when he was in his 80s. He had a great run, and he was a pervert, but nobody talks about that. But my favorite guy that went to the University of Pennsylvania, I have two favorites. The third guy to walk on the moon, P.D. Conrad, who I worked with, and he's one of the influencers. And the other guy was Dr. Holliday, Wyatt Earp's, thank you, Wyatt Earp's asshole buddy, who was a dentist, a murderer, rapist. But nobody talks about poor Doc Holliday. They don't talk about Pete Conrad, who was the third guy to walk on the moon either. We only assimilate what we want to assimilate. And right now, King Charles III, full disclosure, I've met him before he was a king. And he's concerned now because of the Netflix series, The Crown. And one of the things that he had been concerned about was the things that he did in his youth. Well, he was an adult. He was 25, 30 years old when he did them, 35 years old. And that he was afraid that the current generation here in the UK that follow Netflix would think that he's like the Crown 5, the 6th edition of it, because of some of the not so admirable things he did. Now, the fact that it's in the headlines, I don't guarantee anything, but it's not likely that he's going to be asked this on the BBC show, Good Morning Britain. Because the news media, which is liberal at best, skews you. And the fact that they skew you away from information like this is good for us. It's good for us. For those of the people that are going to roll up in climate kinds of things, this is good information to have. You don't have to read it. I mean, that's the whole report right there. But nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about it. And it's not fashionable to talk about it. And the world's fucked up. Everywhere you look, the world's fucked up. And that's going to stay, until the meteor hits us in 142 years. Nobody even talks about the fucking meteor. Arguably 142 years, nobody in this room will be around. And they spoon feed the information. And it's to our benefit to spoon feed some of the information back to our potential sellers. Now, I don't think any of the kids, since this report came out, has actually handed them 3,700 pages, but you can get it in the link. But it's pretty dismal reading. It's pretty dismal reading. But every place you look, things are in terrible shape. And if prayer got the job done, okay, prayer doesn't get the job done. If love got the job done, love doesn't get the job done. Okay, I can go on and on. The only thing that gets the job done is you. Taking the decision, as they say here in the UK, or making the decision that you're going to discard all the past information you have. Remember that big pile of dinosaur shit, and head towards the gunfire, run towards the gunfire, and metaphorically kill everybody. Now, see, even words like that don't sit well with the audiences, even with or without the word metaphorically, because you weren't raised to do that. That's not your DNA. And unless you were privileged to be the son or daughter of Andrew Agassi and Steffi Graf, who were married, world-class athletes, gold medalists, top of the tennis ladders, made a gazillion dollars. And they both don't want their kids to be in athletics. Interesting. They don't want their kids. Well, you tell a kid not to do it, what the hell they do? They do it, right? So I'm told, I've never seen the kids play tennis, but the son and daughter are supposed to be phenomenal tennis players. They're phenomenal athletes. Well, with those genes, I mean, unlike uncoordinated me, I mean, they got a great chance. But the last night you saw Steve, who, again, full disclosure, I used to do some work in the 80s for Apple, and I saw him, I won't say at his peak, but I mean, he was a vicious guy. And then I saw him close to his death in Bangalore at a private nightclub, which he certainly wasn't at his best, staggering around. And the manager of the club say, Mr. Jobs, the band stopped 45 minutes ago. If it was you dancing around, they would have thrown you out as soon as the fucking band stopped. But Steve Jobs, they let wander around for 45 minutes, dancing with himself. The comments about Mr. Jobs vis-a-vis the movie. Yes, sir.
It seemed to be a recurring theme throughout the movie. The best way that I can articulate it would be, in business and when stakes are high, ethics bends the knee to efficacy.
One of the mantras of the program is if it's legal, moral, and ethical. And I say moral and ethics swing in the wind depending where you are. And you can convince yourself of anything. I mean, the recent crypto collapse, I'm sure, other than it's a little dubious now because he's running various places, the kid. But you can convince yourself of anything. So that's why I say ethics and morality swing in the wind. But you can help stabilize ethics and morality if you only go to places that have a rule of law. If you don't have any rule of law, you can forget legal, moral, and ethical. And there's plenty of places where they pretend to have a rule of law, and they really don't have a rule of law. Other comments about Mr. Jobs? Yes, sir. Doc.
Steve turned his dreams into reality, and if people told him no, he'd find new people. Everyone was expendable to make his dreams happen.
Correct. And you see that in current day, people that are emailing or tweeting things that are contrary to what Mr. Musk believes are gone now. And that's the world I come from. I'm not interested in your fucking opinion. The last thing on my agenda is your opinion or your opinion. I may be wrong, but I'm never in doubt. I think Steve even says in the movie anyway, don't confuse me with the facts. That world is so different from the world that you come from. You may think it, but you don't say it. We have a Hall of Famer. The fact that he's got 2 degrees from Harvard really doesn't mean anything. A Mexican kid. He says, Mr. Peña says things we are only dare to sometimes think inside our heads. One of the recent, I think, great comments that Elon said, he says, a bank will loan he doesn't use the word dipshit, like a dipshit kid $100,000 to go to university, but they won't give him a $10,000 business loan. I mean, that says it all. How is that possible? And then President Biden, in his infinite stupidity, wants to forgive all this fucking student debt. Or not. And now he's backtracked. Then half the student debt, and now it's student debt between such and such and such and such, because somebody has showed him on a chart, a spreadsheet, what that really does. And he doesn't want to be known as, I guess, his legacy. He's got about enough negative legacy that he doesn't want to be known, to let all the fucking generation, whatever, off the hook in that much money, vis-a-vis that much money. What else about Steve? Now, you got an article, you read an article last, okay, yes, sir.
He's absolutely obsessed, like laser focused, no chink in the armor. Even during the movie, he was asked questions, and his replies are what's on his mind, not necessarily to answer the question.
It's like, even though I put my toe in the political arena here, and I used to make fun of guys on television. They have 4 or 5 bullet points. No matter what you ask them, they're going to answer with one of those 4 or 5 bullet points. And lots of times, it doesn't have anything to do with the goddamn question. I used to poke fun at that. Now, the shoe's on the other foot, and I have 6 bullet points. And one's about vets, one's about seniors over a certain age, one's about immigration, and those are my answers. I don't give a fuck what the question is. But I used to poke fun at that. I said, what are these guys, brain dead? Don't they know? Can't they understand English? Well, I'm one of those brain dead now because that's how I answer, because that's a proven methodology to get your point across. Himmler, one of the right-hand men for Hitler, said it. If you say it enough, loud enough, it becomes truth. I believe that. I believe that. And that's why Hitler is on my influence wall over there, because he was, if not the greatest orator, one of the greatest orators in the last 100 years. And he convinced a lot of people to do a lot of ugly things. When I was a guest of the Polish government, Sally and I were going to a couple of the death camps. People that lived like as far away as that gate back there. Here's the concentration camp. Here's the ovens here. That lived, that's about a third of a mile. No, we never heard anything. So now it's the children or grandchildren of the people that lived there. Didn't your grandparents ever tell you? No. Then one guy we talked to, he says, my dad said growing up as a kid, he says, there was a different kind of smell in their village. That's the stench of burning flesh. That's the closest I could get to find anybody that, a couple 100 yards down the road. We can convince ourselves of anything. And heretofore, before you got here, and one of the reasons I don't give the seminar, other than when I thought I was going to retire 2 or 3 years ago, any place other than here, because the ambiance of this estate is special. And when we talk about goals the day after tomorrow, yesterday's dreams are today's realities, there's no better metaphor than this place. And I did it in 15 months. What else about Steve?
At the time of his death, 80% of his wealth was through his Pixar acquisition, or Disney stock. So to the QLA methodology, he made most of his wealth from acquiring and selling that business. And it's also where he learned a new way of managing, where he was more of like big picture negotiations. He renegotiated the deal with Disney. Despite people telling him that they needed more data, he had the intuition that Toy Story was going to be a hit, so he decided to go public despite advisors' comments on waiting. And so yeah, I saw a lot of similarities to your strategy that he created as well through acquiring and selling that business.
Well, IBM, for example, since Mr. Watson Sr. founded it about 100 years ago, more or less, had made 400 or 500 acquisitions. Ford Motor Company, which is more than 100 years old, about 120 years old, two great things about that is the reason why Clayton Ford is still CEO after all these years is because when I tell you, when we get around to how you're going to set up your company and how you're going to tell your lawyers to make it major shareholder friendly, which means you. Some of the big white shoe law firms won't do that because they don't want to go defend it in court. They don't want to go to the Supreme Court. But 90% of the law firms will make it shareholder friendly for you. And as you heard, Gabriel, the little fat kid from Austria who's rolling up in Switzerland, he said he made it shareholder friendly. And and the reason why there's still a Ford, but Ford Motor Company has made 300 or 400 acquisitions. Almost all the big companies, other than a handful, maybe that many, have grown through acquisition. And so when the two or three of you asked me about value added, which I poked fun at yesterday, right? That is a myth. You add value by buying another fucking company. And what does that really say? Just like our 3,700-page report, it's a motherfucker to add value. So you add value by slapping some more shit on it, bolting more shit on it. And that's been around since, not since caveman, that's a Trump exaggeration, but it's been around a long, long time. You had an article last night about Steve's daughter, who, if the movie that you saw is the one I'm thinking of, after he found out that, or he thought she was smart, that, you know, he started giving the mother more money and blah, 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 and so she was smart. But he was a miserable person. There's another movie coming out, which is, I think, the 5th movie. The one you saw, I think, is the 3rd. We don't use the 4th anymore. But there's a 5th movie coming out, I think, next year. That, I mean, iterates or emphasizes virtually all the bad things he did, whereas now it's just kind of piecemeal. I don't know if the movie that you saw, because there's a number of them, where they're sitting down doing a spreadsheet, recapitalization, looking at who's going to get what stock. And he walks by and he says, who are those people on the list? And they're the people that had been with him 7, 8, 10, 12, 15 years. He says, take them off the list. They're not getting any stock. It's a handshake deal. If you learned anything from the founder, there's no such a thing as a handshake deal. Now, Wozniak is the mentee of one of my mentees. You're going to see some slides later on. And don't focus on the good-looking girls that are in the slides. But I couldn't get any pictures other than, well, with my mentee and the Woz that didn't have good-looking girls in it. And so either my mentee or the Woz has an entourage that follows them around. I'm pretty sure I know which of those two has the entourage. He said that Mr. Jobs could not be convinced that there was an easier way to do it. In other words, a nice way. And by the way, the word nice is a derivative from a 14th, 15th century Anglo-Saxon word that means idiot, retarded, moron. That's what nice comes from. And look at where we are now with the word nice. And you saw in the little link to the band leader guy, and he says the worst 2 words in the world are good job. Now, there's been a very successful book. I don't agree with it 100%, that, you know, good is the enemy of great. Some of you in this room have done a good, decent. That's a whole other, I could give a whole lecture on the word decent as well. Because decent is in the eye of the beholder. None of you have done shit in my world. Okay? All of you have the opportunity to do shit. When I mean shit, I mean stuff. But I'm never going to change those words. I have to catch myself when I'm talking to Sister Superior Luce. And when I talk to her, that picture of them were out standing out in front of a Volkswagen van. The whole trip there, the nuns are all going like this when we're talking. So, I mean, it's like a blur because I'm saying fuck, shit, cunt. My language doesn't stop. It's the same. I treat everybody the same. Our 36-year-old daughter was here. She'd say, Daddy treats everybody the same, like shit. And what have you been taught? Some of you have been taught, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. With such a load of hot crap, it's beyond me. If you can't say anything nice, don't. But some of you have been trained that way. And how's your program worked out? It hasn't, as they say in Scotland. On that happy note, goodbye, YouTube.